Alrighty, I think we're live now. So let's see. Can everyone hear me all right? One, two, three, four. There we go. Okay, good stuff. So I've definitely got at least one person. There we go. Awesome. Alrighty. While we're waiting for a few more people to join us, what we're going to do today in the live stream is I really, there's two main topics, and then we'll get to the live chat as per usual. Is I want to talk about the Irishman, Martin Scorsese's new film. So I thought we'd start with that, and then we'd talk about episode 4 of the Mandalorian, because oh lordy, there's been a lot of controversy about that episode. All of a sudden, people accusing it of going woke. Has there been some wokest pocus? G'day Estri and Hal, how are you? G'day Chris. So I thought we'd sort of discuss that. Before we're waiting for a few more people to join us though, just a couple of quick little announcements, team, to get them out of the way. I've been listening to some quite good music lately, I have to say, or a new album I've discovered, which has been quite enjoyable. It's called The Heart of Man by Tony Anderson. Mr. Anderson. Tony Anderson. It's like a sort of what you might call orchestral cinematic. It's original music, but it's on Spotify. It's a good album. It's really good. No, obviously no singing, because it's all sort of orchestral stuff. But really beautiful tracks. I think just about every track on that album is glorious. So if you're looking for something and you're into cinematic style orchestral music with a bit of a modern spin on it as well, then I'd highly recommend that. The Heart of Man by Tony Anderson. No, I'm not getting paid to say that. And maybe if you've been wondering about the background, I've just yesterday I have gone and ordered some awesome new banners for the background for these live streams. So hopefully from next week onwards, if not, it'll definitely be the one after, you will notice a huge improvement. I've actually had to turn the camera sideways because behind me there's not much of a glamorous wall to look at. But I have found a solution. So hopefully in the next couple of live streams you will see a much more glamorous backdrop with some very important pieces of classical art, actually. So yeah, so that'll be a bit of a change that's coming. And lastly, I have yesterday booked my tickets. I've done it. G'day, Josie. I've gone and booked my tickets for episode 9. They can fly now. So I've bought my tickets, and I am going to see the very first screening here in New Zealand in my local theatre. I think it's 10 a.m. on the morning of the 19th. Now, for those who are tuning in from other parts of the world, we're a day ahead of you. So I think a lot of you, so it's already Tuesday here. I think for a lot of you, it's only Monday. So first thing on the 19th here, a day ahead of the rest of the world, I'm going to go and see it, and then I'll get home from the theatre, and I'm going to record my reactions, and I'll let you know what I think of episode 9, They Can Fly. I don't know if you've seen the latest TV spots either, but there's that one where she's using the force on the Ray is using the force on those stormtroopers and or those first order troopers, and Ray, Finn and Poe are behind her, and there's another comedic piece of genius. Does she do that to us? So I remember when the Force Awakens came out, there was this big debate. Which one of them is Han Solo? Is it Finn or is it Poe? It turns out that neither of them are Han Solo. That in fact they are both kind of it looks like in this film they're sort of these idiotic droids who just say inane things behind Rey. So there you go. By the way, we're going to do a Christmas live stream. I was talking about this last week, but we're going to do a Christmas live stream on the 23rd or the 24th. So that might be the 23rd your time. But the 24th, yeah, that's right, Andre, not even close to Han. We're going to do a Christmas live stream. So I thought we'd talk Christmas movies. So start getting ready for that. Watch your favourite Christmas movies. Maybe get the guitar out, sing a few carols. Maybe even break open the eggnog a little bit early. But we'll do that, the final live stream before Christmas. Okay, so let's just jump straight into it. The Irishman. What did I think? Well, I'll tell you what I think in just a second. I want to read you this article from, was it from inews.co.uk, who have a terrible spell checking service. It's hilarious, this article, because it sort of gives a brief synopsis of Frank Sheeran. So Frank Sheeran, who's played by Robert De Niro in The Irishman, is the main focus of the movie The Irishman, Martin Scorsese's film. And he claimed on his deathbed, you were close to death, that he had been the one who'd killed Jimmy Hoffa. So let's just have a quick read of this article. I'll give you the background, and then I'll tell you what I think about The Irishman. Astron says, did you watch The Irishman in one go? And I said, Astron, yes, I did. I watched it, apart from the last 20 minutes. I had to actually, it just got so late, I had to go to bed. I flew back from Western Australia, back into New Zealand on Sunday night, and there's a 5-hour time difference between Western Australia and New Zealand. I lost a whole day flying back. I travelled forward in time. So I get back to New Zealand, it's quite late. I leave Western Australia at 7 a.m. in the morning. I get back home, it's like 10 o'clock at night. And so I sat down, and because I was just wide awake because of the 5-hour time difference. So I started watching it. I got through almost all of it, and then I just watched the rest of it the next night. Okay, so The Irishman. Let's just give a bit of background here from this article. The Irishman has all the ingredients of a Scorsese classic as the director reteams with Robert De Niro for their 9th film together. It also stars Al Pacino as Jimmy Hoffa, alongside regular De Niro counterparts Joe Pesci and Harvey Keitel, an exercise in bringing the old gang back together. And can I say that I actually think that was a bit of a distraction in this film. The fact that Scorsese's reuniting with some of his favourite actors, it sort of felt like it put a little bit of a bit too much pressure on the film, and possibly it sort of bogged it down a little bit, because I think it's a good film in and of itself, but that aspect of it, I sort of, what it does is it feels a little bit like a reunion rather than anything groundbreaking that you've seen Scorsese do with these actors before. So to me, that look, it's great to see these guys on screen together. There's no doubting that. But I don't know if it necessarily made the film better as a result. It just sort of, it had a bit of a reunion type feel rather than anything groundbreaking. But anyway, let me get back to the article. The film was inspired by the true story of union leader and alleged hitman Frank Sheeran, and is partially based on I Heard You Paint Houses, the book by homicide prosecutor Charles Brandt. And by the way, that's what the actual title of the film is on screen. I Heard You Paint Houses. In that book, this is where their spell checking in this article fails. Brandy, it's not Brandy, it's Brandt, interviewed Sheeran shortly before his death, where Sheeran made some shocking revelations about his criminal life. Born in New Jersey in 1920 to Mary Agnes Hanson and house painter Thomas Francis Sheeran Jr., Sheeran grew up in Derby, a small working-class borough on the outskirts of Philadelphia. He first enlisted in the army in 1941 after completing basic training and was assigned to military police. Following the attack on Pearl Harbor, Sheeran volunteered for training in the Army Airborne, but after dislocating his shoulder was transferred to the 45th Infantry Division known as the Thunderbirds Division. His first combat experience came during the Allied Forces Italian campaign. He then served in the landings in southern France, the Battle of the Bulge, and the invasion of Germany. Though Sheeran served a lengthy 411 days of combat duty, developing a callousness to the taking of human lives, he lost as many as 50 days under AWOL, absent without leave. And the quote here is, mostly spent drinking red wine and chasing Italian, French, and German women, which kind of is hardly surprising given the character of that character. He was discharged from the army shortly before the war ended. He would later go on to claim that he partook in the massacres and executions of German prisoners of war, acts which violated the Geneva Convention, obviously, and were classified as war crimes. Now, that's interesting because they make reference to that in the film. They have him, a scene with him talking about how he shot a couple of German soldiers and how he did that, and it sort of does form a bit of a part of his backstory in the movie. He became a truck driver after the war, but accepted criminal jobs on the side to make a bit of extra money, including murder for hire. I took some criminal work, including killing people. Just some light part-time work. His criminal ingenuity didn't go unnoticed, and Sheeran became a close associate of mafia boss Russell Bufalino, who acted as Sheeran's mentor. Bufalino introduced Sheeran to Jimmy Hoffa, the president of the US and Canadian labor union Teamsters International. The pair became close friends, with Hoffa using Sharon for muscle, hiring him for the assassination of rebellious members, as well as members of rival unions. Sharon's time with the Teamsters gets the most attention in The Irishman, and that's true. But one of the funny things is that the film feels a little bit like, unlike other films of this type, the focus really of the film is actually on the human relationships and these sort of, it explores deeper themes rather than just the history in which it takes place. So the history is there and it's very present, but it does also take a bit of a back seat, which is interesting. The focus really of this film are these characters and their relationships with each other and their own lives, and I guess exploring the question of meaning. I'll get to that in just a second. It was during this period that one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history occurred, the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. Hoffa disappeared in 1975, same year I was born, under mysterious circumstances after President Nixon barred him from any role in the Teamsters following his release from prison. He is presumed dead, although his body has never been found. Well, to be fair, I doubt Jimmy Hoffa is still alive, even if his disappearance was fate. Shortly before his death in 2003, Sharon claimed to have killed Hoffa, and that's really sort of the big part of the culmination of the film. Sharon confessed to killing Hoffa as part of his interview for Charles Brandt's book. According to Brandt, Sharon and Hoffa were driven to a house in Detroit. They went into the house where Sharon claims that he shot Hoffa twice in the back of the head, and that's obviously part of the film. The allegations are disputed, and the FBI is still trying to connect Sharon to the murder by retesting blood found at the scene with new improvements in forensics technology. Since Hoffa's body was never found, the location of his presumed death was unknown for 30 years, by which time it had become highly unlikely that traces of Hoffa's DNA could be found. Blood that was found in the Detroit house was found not to be Hoffa's, and while the location was only minutes from the restaurant where Hoffa was last seen, no evidence linked Hoffa to the house. Well, and that's kind of, I mean, it's hardly surprising, is it? All these years later, it's not like he left a note. By all accounts, it was a very quick death. So yeah, I don't know what evidence they would have found to link him. But anyway, so that's sort of the background to this film, The Irishman. And my thoughts on the film in general are that I think it's not bad. I mean, this is the thing about Scorsese. It's even a film from Scorsese where you'd say it's not bad. It's a good film. Look, this is not Scorsese's best. I don't think this makes it into Scorsese's top 5 list or anything like that. But this is a good film. And even for a Scorsese film, like when you say about, it's not bad, of a Scorsese film, that means that film is miles ahead of anything else that sort of even your top directors today are making on their good day. He's just such a competent and phenomenal filmmaker. I mean, the guy could dream up a plot, wake up, and he could yawn the thing out, and it would still be miles ahead of most of what we're seeing today. So it's a good Scorsese film. As I said, the fact that he brought the old gang back together, Pacino, De Niro, Pesci, Keitel, it actually sort of felt like a reunion, and I wonder if it distracted a little bit. So the focus is sort of more on the players on the stage rather than the play itself. And so I'm gonna go back and rewatch it again, because I think on a second time through, I think I'll enjoy it a bit more and just take more out of it without any of those expectations. And I think just to sort of sit in and absorb De Niro, making films is I mean, he's a good filmmaker. It's got a very personal edge to it, the film. It's not so much about the historical events, like I said. This is a film that's really about other deeper concepts like aging, mortality, and sort of basically these men who are contemplating their own personal legacy. There's an interesting theme around fatherhood that runs through it. And, what have I left behind me as a legacy? Because the reality is, by the way, spoiler alert, I should have said that at the beginning, apologies. If you don't want anything spoiled, maybe block your ears now and I'll wave my hands when I'm finished. But, you end this film with an elderly man contemplating his life and alone, sort of thing. And it's a part of this film, is the whole idea of facing your own mortality and also looking at your legacy as a man as you age and saying, well, what have I left behind me? And that's really a big part of this. Spoilers over. The visual effects were, I would say the visual effects were mostly good. There's the face aging makeup and technology that they use in this. That's mostly good. There's one or two moments where I found it a little bit distracting. I know people were raving about it, but in places it was like, I don't know. It did, to me, at places it felt a little bit distracting. The one thing I'd say is it's not till the very end of the film where our characters start to age quite considerably. All of a sudden, then their movements and their voices change a lot more dramatically. But earlier on, even when they're younger, one thing I found really distracting was that, particularly De Niro, his voice doesn't change. So younger De Niro in this film still has the same voice as older De Niro we meet at the start of the film. So even though they're going back and doing these flashbacks where he's supposed to be a lot younger, he still has the same voice, and the body movements and stuff, it's still De Niro. And I found that a little bit distracting in places. It sort of pulled me out of the film. And so even though the facial makeup was, and the face and the de-aging and stuff was around the face was quite considerable, that aspect of it still didn't quite gel earlier on. Now, as they get older, the voices change and the movements become a lot more pronounced. There's this great scene with Pesci when he's older. I won't ruin it for you, but just watch out for, sort of in the final half an hour of the film, Joe Pesci is an older man. And it's he there's some really good acting there, and everything about his presence in that moment was really good. There's a great, he's carrying an injury now. Again, I won't spoil it for you, but the way he sort of contorts his body a bit to do that is it was actually quite impressive. It's as I said, for me it's a good film. But I wouldn't consider it to be better than anything else Scorsese's made, and I don't think it's as good as several of his other the top films. Yeah, Josie says they're all named Tony. So this is a film where really I think you've got to go back and give it a second or maybe third viewing, because once you get past all the Tonys and Franks, you can start to figure out who's who a bit more, and it, because Scorsese doesn't flatter you. Scorsese doesn't flatter you. He doesn't dumb it down for the audience. So with his exposition dialogue, that's the thing about Scorsese. Often you have the situation where you have a character just say a line really quickly, one sentence, and it's actually kind of important to the story, but he doesn't go back and labour the point. He expects you to actually keep up with what's going on, and so that's why I think going back and rewatching the film is something that is definitely well worth doing. So for me, it's a good film. I mean, it's Scorsese. The guy does not make rubbish. That's the point. Well, I mean, he doesn't. Even on an average day, his filmmaking is phenomenal. Astron's asked me what I think my top 3 Scorsese films are. Well, that's a good question, Astron. I'd probably have to say I really like Casino. I think obviously you can't go past things like, if you're going to say top 3, you've got to probably go, don't you? Goodfellas, Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, don't you? I would say that would be top 3. I quite like Casino though. And for me personally, just the personal attachment to it, I think I put Casino above Goodfellas, actually, funnily enough. I mean, I know technically that's not sound, but just there's something about Casino that I really, I really love that film. And I also love Shutter Island. Shutter Island I thought was awesome. Now, okay, so Josie says I quite like The Departed and Shutter Island. So The Departed is a good film. I didn't like that as much as those others that I've mentioned, but there's no denying. Look, the guy makes good films, right? The one I didn't really like, even though it's technically very solid, is Silence, and that's because I felt that it missed something about the authenticity of martyrdom in the Christian context. That's something I understand, and I felt that was missing. And the ending for me was really more the end justifies the means, and I just felt it was of his films, it was probably one that I didn't really like. But I mean, anything that he does is just well made. That's Scorsese. The Irishman. Is it worth your time? Well, your time being the optimum here, because 3.5 hours worth of film. It's a long time. Apparently, I haven't seen it, but apparently online people have posted a way to break the film down into sort of episodic parts, so where to stop it and then go back to it if you want to watch it in chunks. I would recommend watching it all in one go if you can. Take a Saturday afternoon or something, or start early on a Saturday evening or something like that. And because for me, I got most of it done. It was only the last 20 minutes I had to go back for. And I think that makes a big difference. One thing I'd say is I felt the start was a little bit slow. I felt that it was a little bit, as it's getting into the film, I found myself sort of thinking, oh man, what's going on here? It doesn't grab you straight away. It doesn't start with a hiss and a roar. It starts with a slow burn and a slow build. But then once it builds, it's in true Scorsese style. It doesn't take long to get through that, but then it just starts to build. And because it's Scorsese, it's not like other films where they start slow and you're like, oh, I want to shut this off and quit. I think generally you hang in there with it because it's still, even a slow start is quality. And it really ramps up. And then that final ending is what I would call the sort of the crescendo, the final act is very, very Scorsese. The way you have this movie with sparse, there's no sort of music. I mean, he uses period music from that era rather than cinematic scoring. And then you have a lot of periods where it's sparse. There's no, you don't have, musical score. And then he sort of loads up with the musical score in the final act. Really, when the crescendo comes, everything sort of builds. So it's a very sort of typical Scorsese like that. Good film. Worth your time if you enjoy Scorsese. And Josie says the first hour had me looking at the time, but afterwards it flowed better. Yeah, I agree. And it is the first hour you're sort of thinking to yourself, I remember thinking to myself, what's going on here? What story is being told? I couldn't quite get my head around what the story was. It was sort of felt like, it's just reminiscing and come on, get into the story. But then it does. And in some ways that backstory is, you think, was it necessary? Yeah, I suppose it was. There's a whole subplot building with his daughters and stuff like that. It gives you a bit of their backstory together. But yeah, as I said, it focuses on those characters rather than the historical events as a whole. It's really about exploring the sort of the personal, deeper questions around those characters. So, The Irishman out of the way. Let us talk about The Mandalorian, Episode 4. So here we are, Episode 4. And what's happened in Episode 4 is there's been accusations now from some that this has gone woke. That people were upset about things like the fight between Cara Dune and the Mandalorian, the scene in the village where he asks, can anybody shoot? And the only person who can shoot is a female. And some people have highlighted those things, and I know some were sort of said the warning signs are there. They're panicking about this. Others have said that they thought that it was full woke. And then, of course, what that invites is everyone else who this is the thing about Twitter and social media, everyone just loves a good pile-on and a controversial hot take. So then everyone else responds in their usual sort of, those who are woke respond in their usual fashion, and the name calling and the absurdity start, and people start making commentary videos to prove their progressive credentials to everyone else, to the world. Oh, look at me. I would never say anything. I don't have an opinion that's at all controversial. And I'm going to slam these filthy, filthy men for their disgusting opinions. It's like, it's just an opinion, people. Get over it. I personally don't think it's gone woke, but I think Episode 4 has exposed some other problems that, for my mind, are pretty serious about the series now. And it's got nothing to do with wokeness. So what did I think about the Cara Dune scene? Well, it didn't bother me. Actually, all the hype that I heard before I'd watched the episode was that she gave him a thrashing and that she handed him his beans. Well, so that's not what happened at all. Her character's well established. She's a big girl, obviously, and she's a shock trooper. So no surprise, she's going to be a feisty fighter. And she also had the drop on him, and literally had the drop on him. And then they have a brief scuffle, you'd call it, and then it ends in a draw. So pistols at each other's head, that was hardly a thrashing, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, and so yeah, Sylvia says having a having a cool female character isn't automatically woke, and that's coming from someone who hates wokeness. So yeah, you're right, Sylvia. That's exactly it. It isn't automatically woke, and as I said, her character's established. She's a shock trooper. They have a fight, a scuffle. It's very brief, and she doesn't. She gets to jump on him because she was waiting for him, which is fine. And then it ends in a draw. So it was very brief. It ends in a draw. She doesn't thrash him. There was nothing about that I thought was that woke. And then the whole thing of the only female in the village, the only person who'd fired a gun was a female. Andre says, I haven't watched it yet, but I don't care enough to avoid spoilers. Don't worry, mate. I was hoping, Josie said, I'm waiting for your thoughts on Watchmen. I've got some brief thoughts on Watchmen in the previous live stream. Go back and watch that, Josie, if you haven't seen it. But I didn't get a chance. I was hoping to try and watch episode 6 of The Watchmen last night. But episode 6 was episode 7 of The Watchmen last night. But I actually didn't get time. I was doing other work, prepping for this live stream, and trying to get to bed. I'm still catching up from jet lag from coming back into the country on Sunday night. But anyway, here's the problem, though. So the only person in the village was a female who fired a gun. Again, that didn't bother me too much. There's a bigger problem with that, though. And it's really, I felt that was just so unbelievable that in this village, quite a well-established village, in this very hostile environment, look where they're living, and what's around them, that there's only one person who actually knows how to fire a weapon. It doesn't matter what the gender was. The fact that it was only one person was really stuck out like a sore thumb. I just found that a little bit unbelievable. In a world of space blasters, only one person knew how to fire a weapon. And then on top of that, when they were doing the preparation for the sort of the battle in that episode, these people can't even hold pointed sticks in the right direction. And it just all felt so unbelievable. There wasn't even basic rudimentary, I don't know, what would you call them, defense skills in what is clearly a more basic, bit more hostile sort of planet. It just didn't actually seem that. And I thought that was an issue with this episode. So this sort of points to me, Chris Jameson, hold that thought about James Bond. We'll come back to James Bond. You can ask me that question in a minute. Someone says maybe all the men folk in that village were woke vegan metrosexuals. I don't know how to fire a gun, but I know how to put on moisturizer. No, I didn't think there was, honestly, I didn't see wokeness, I've got to be honest. But what I did see was another episode. This episode was the least favourite for me out of all 4. And the storytelling I thought was the thinnest in this episode. It's really, really thin. And basically what you've got is out of 4 episodes, a total of half of them, 2 of them now, have been filler episodes. And this episode was largely filler. Okay, we're introduced to the character of Cara Dune. And we find out that the Mandalorian doesn't like taking his helmet off. But then other than that, a lot of it's filler. And it was also very rushed, this episode too. Unlike previous episodes where the whole thing of the Mandalorian, taking its time, this one was just quick, sort of, and there's things that were missing in the way of development. And so I'd have to say this episode was my least favourite. And the problem with this episode is not wokeness, I think, it's quality. All of a sudden, the visuals, the scenery, and the costumes, and it could just be the way they're lit, because this is, I think, of all the episodes, this is probably the brightest as far as lighting goes. It had sort of a lot more bright, natural light, and I think that always does take away, particularly from Star Wars, you think has a sort of darker tone generally to it, and a bit more of a grittiness. Well, the grittiness is missing from this episode, and so all of a sudden, with brighter light on visuals and scenery and costumes, it tends to expose the flaws a bit more, and things just they looked a bit too perfect. They looked too pristine for Star Wars. Remember the whole thing of George Lucas with a lived-in universe? Well, it didn't. It felt too clean. This actually, so all of a sudden in this episode, the visuals, the scenery, the costumes, it did not feel like an expensive TV show anymore. The acting and the dialogue the dialogue that's written and the way it's delivered from the support cast was very, very average in this episode. It hasn't been like that in the previous 3, but in this episode, and I include Gina Carano in that. I mean, can you blame her? She's not an actress. She's a fighter who's doing, these action roles, and that's her specialty. And with people in those roles, what you've got to do is you give them more sparse and suitable dialogue. You don't give them sort of big periods of dialogue that have to carry some sort of emotional weight. That's not really what you do. She's still learning the craft of acting. And so there's one or two scenes where she's just given too much of dialogue, and it's sort of, her acting skills are not up to the same level, and it was just noticeable. And particularly some of the support cast, I felt that their delivery of dialogue, and some of the dialogue, like that innkeeper lady, the bartender lady, what the heck was that dialogue? It was the delivery was odd, the dialogue was odd, and funnily enough, it kind of felt like an average Star Trek episode to me. And this is something I noticed in episode 1 with that blue alien guy, that his bounty that he captured. He felt very much like a Star Trek character, not a Star Wars character. This episode had a sort of Star Trek vibe to it. And I know some people saying, oh, but this is a homage to the great samurai films. I'm like, that's not how this works. It's great if you want to do homage, and I get that. I totally get that. But the homage has got nothing to do with quality. And the quality of this show is the problem. So the story, I think, was paper thin, second filler episode in 4 episodes. We've only got 4 to go. We're halfway through now. And you've had 2 filler episodes. And that doesn't bode well. Now, by the way, just because The Last Jedi was terribly awful, it doesn't mean that anything that it is better on the scale, higher on the scale than The Last Jedi should automatically be given some sort of elevated to some sort of elite status, as if it's, it's automatically guaranteed its own greatness just by not being as bad as The Last Jedi. That's not how that should work. We should still be rightly, I think, appropriately critical, not overly critical, but appropriately critical of things that are just not as well crafted as they could be. And this episode was not as well crafted. And there's things, like I said, with the plot and with what's happening, where all of a sudden we're rushing things. So that scene where the villager tries to take his helmet off, that was so awkward and weird, because it was like you have this previous sort of, there's this sort of, you can see there's a bit of an attraction between, a very basic attraction between the two of them. I guess she's living in a village. She's desperate for a husband because she's living in a big bad world, and all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden too, by the way, you had this period of weeks, a matter of weeks passes really instantly in this episode. Remember that? They go from the whole battle with those enemies to all of a sudden a period of weeks has passed, and it did not feel, that was not a good transition. They literally had to tell us with exposition dialogue that several weeks had passed, because it did not feel like several weeks had passed. It literally felt like the next day. Or in fact, not even the next day, the day of that battle. And so the next thing you know, she's trying to take his helmet off. Now, clearly that would make sense if there's a sort of much bigger development, much more development had gone into developing the relationship between the two of them. But otherwise it was kind of like, why is she trying to take his helmet off? It's a pretty personal thing to be doing there. And so it just felt a bit unearned. There was no development to get us to that point. And then the other question I had was, how the heck did they know Yoda was on that planet? How do these tracking devices work? Like, the Mandalorian was talking about leaving Yoda there, which indicates the tracking devices don't just track all over the galaxy, that you've got to get close to find out where Yoda is. And so it's like, okay, then how did they know Yoda was there to use the tracker? It was just, again, this episode for me. So people were saying, well, Bryce Dallas Howard, she knocked it out of the park because she directed this one. No, she didn't. Deborah Chow, or Cho, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, apologies. Deborah Cho, who directed the last episode, she knocked it out of the park. Episode 3, I think, was the best episode so far. And here's what I look for to me that points to the quality of the directing. Number 1 is the actual the dialogue that ends up, the scenes that are acted between characters that end up on screen in the episode, and the action set pieces. And in this episode, the action set pieces were, I think, of all 4 episodes, they were the worst of all. You just go back and watch those action set pieces. They are not as well filmed as previous. Deborah Chow, what she did, that action set piece that's the crescendo of episode 3, it was a completely different ballpark to what we saw this week. And then the other thing is the dialogue between characters, because a lot of that does come down to directing. What the director has the ability to say, let's do that again. Can you change the way you deliver that line, etc. And in this episode, the dialogue delivery was, out of all 4 episodes, this was the one that was the least impressive. So I don't think that this was the Bryce Dallas Howard knocked it out of the park, as I heard one commentator saying yesterday. No, she didn't. And I like Bryce Dallas Howard as an actor. I've liked her since I first saw her in Lady in the Water. But it doesn't mean that necessarily you're going to be a great director. And she might become a great director, who knows? But this episode was not great. For me, all of a sudden, this felt like a sort of average 90s TV show, or even an 80s TV show. It had sort of these campy aspects to it. The quality was very noticeable. It did not feel, or maybe a fan film, a fan-made short film with really good visual effects. But all of a sudden, there's a noticeable drop-off in the acting and in the dialogue, the look, the visuals, the action set pieces. This was a rushed story in this episode. So for me, the wokeness has got nothing to do with it. I didn't see anything getting woke. What I saw was a TV series starting to get a bit broken, and this was my criticism. You can go back and watch my original video where some people lambasted me for making the video, where I said the Mandalorian needs to get better, and I still stand by that. And one of the things I said, my biggest concern was the story felt paper thin, and I could see all the signs there that this was a paper thin story. Well, this episode for me seems to be confirming that fear, that this is a paper thin story. And that's the whole point, isn't it, of watching television and watching stories and listening to stories, is the story has some substance to it. And this feels like this episode, the substance was just missing. It didn't, this episode was not as good. I think one of the problems here, I wonder, is whether it's struggling to understand what it actually is as a show. Is it a cartoon series for kids, with live action? Or is it actually a live action television series for an older audience? It's hedging its bets too much, I think. It's not falling strongly. This episode didn't feel like it stuck to the trend that had started. The first 2, and particularly really the 3rd episode, really sort of confirms that this was going for, it's not kiddie entertainment, it's not a kiddie cartoon, but then this one felt more like kiddie cartoon type content. Sylvia says, we had the same discussion. How do the trackers work? Maybe they tap into a person's DNA or something, or is every living thing chipped? Well, I don't think that. Yeah, that would. There's lots of questions around the trackers in this series, because remember the very first episode when he's given the job of hunting for the baby Yoda, he's given his bounty, and he's told they don't have the full serial number, and he's got to use his skills. His considerable skills to track down the baby Yoda. Apologies for those who just went green there. Don't know what that was. Hulking out. But it was like all of a sudden he very quickly found the baby Yoda, and it was like these trackers just seemed to be working. And I was like, okay, so maybe it's DNA, maybe they're chipped. It was sort of weird. And then this episode sort of further compounded it for me and confused things. I don't quite understand the trackers, and maybe it'll all make sense, but this is where you get that sort of kids cartoon vibe from. Think about a children's cartoon, and in a kids cartoon, you don't really fill in all the blanks. Kids are not really looking for that in a kids cartoon, and that's not how a kids cartoon is structured. It doesn't feel it needs to give you lots and lots of character development, and it doesn't feel it needs to fill in all of the blanks. It just sort of says, here's the thing, it's a MacGuffin thing, it's getting us from point A to B. And kids go, great, it's getting us from point A to B. But in this show, it's obviously not a kid's cartoon. And so it's like it would be nice to just get a little bit more of the explanations for what's going on, especially since you consider it Star Wars too. And what is Star Wars? One of Star Wars is, I guess its reputation is that it's lore heavy. It's known as it is a canon that has a heavy lore around it, and you know, who fought who on what planet and what year, and what were the specifications of these spacecraft and the weapons that were used. Like if you're a diehard fan, that's the sort of stuff that, you know, that really spins your wheels, and that Star Wars is known for. So to sort of now be skimping on a little bit of that, yeah, it feels a little bit strange. Astron says, I'm not sure where the story is heading. And yeah, I think, again, this is the filler episode. Again, we've got this filler where, you know, he saves Baby Yoda, and it started, I thought it was quite funny, that start where the Baby Yoda is flicking things off and on. The other thing I'm worried about now is that Baby Yoda has become a bit of a, I don't know, shall we say, a storytelling, a convenient storytelling distraction. So you just sort of, this episode, to me, it was really noticeable. It's like, let's just, here's another shot of Baby Yoda. You like the Baby Yoda? We got some Baby Yoda for you. Hey, drinking some soup, Baby Yoda? You know, it was cute and it was funny. But like, it was like, here's another one. It's sort of like, okay, yeah, we get it. He's cute, but can we get some story? Give us some story, and then let those cute moments sort of organically flow out of that, and let's not use him as a bit of a distraction. So, yeah, and that scene, that final part of the act where that bounty hunter has got his sights on the Baby Yoda, and I remember I saw the reaction on Twitter, and then I saw. I've heard some commentators since, and everyone's like, oh, I was so tense. I didn't know what was going to happen. Were they going to kill the Baby Yoda? And I was like, no, come on. Now, that's how young children react. Because there's no way they were going to kill that Baby Yoda. There was just no way that was going to happen. And so, yeah, I don't know. That was really hyped, that moment. The shot that was heard all throughout the galaxy, and it was like, yeah, no, I don't think that was what was going on there, to be fair. I mean, young kids would have probably gone, oh, is he dead? But if you're a bit older, it was sort of obvious that wasn't going to happen. Yeah, Astron House says, I'm not going to lie, I was hoping for a more adult show. Yeah, and to be fair, I don't mind the fact that it's not, I wasn't looking for anything dark and gritty and R-rated. That's not what I was looking for. But I was just hoping for a bit more substance. And there's plenty of episodes and plenty of TV series that have done this, that have actually told a story with some substance without being R-rated, but at the same time avoiding all that sort of very poorly crafted, bad television stuff. And maybe it's just that we're spoiled. I was thinking about this morning. Maybe it's just that we're so spoiled now with television in the last 15 years has undergone a massive revolution and a massive improvement in the quality of what television is and the quality of the storytelling that it's capable of delivering. And on top of that, this is Disney with this mega budget, this corporation that, you know, that owns your grandma right now, basically. That owns everything. And it's got all the money in the world they want to pour at it. And a lot of money has been given to this TV series. And so you would expect, as I said, I don't expect dark and gritty. It's, you know, I'm not expecting The Wire in space or anything like that. But, hi, Ryan. Thanks for the super chat. Ryan says his fighting skills seem to vary each episode. Yeah, and I think that was a fair question. People said, so the Cara Dune thing, all of a sudden he's kind of easily bested. Whereas then in the previous episode, which was that great action set piece, he's able to destroy what a whole, I don't know, garrison's not the right word, but a unit of stormtroopers, you know, and he goes into their lair and takes them out, dispatches them with skill, and then all of a sudden he's sort of being bested again. So it does sort of seem to go up and down. The Jawas had him. The first episode he's phenomenal. He's on the back of that cannon. In the second episode, the Jawas easily sort of taking him out. But to be fair, I thought the Jawa thing was not so bad because they're all waiting for him at the top and they all fired their little pulse weapons at him at once. Which sort of, to me, that wasn't too over the top. But you're right, I think, Ryan, that is an interesting, the dynamic of his skills go up and down. Anyway, so where was I? We've had quality TV, and I wasn't expecting The Wire in space or Star Wars The Wire or anything like that. But I was sort of expecting this to be a TV show that just had a little bit more substance. Didn't feel like a rushed or sort of very basic, rudimentary 80s or 90s, TV serial show, in the sense that where they just knock the episodes out really quickly. You're just sort of tuning in for an episode of the week sort of thing. And that's what episode 4 felt like. Episode 4 felt like episode of the week. And it had a Star Trek vibe. You go and visit a planet, you go and see the locals in their natural environment, and you're there, you're forced to be with the locals and solve some problem. And it very much felt like a Star Trek thing. Ryan, good point. Episode 2 is bested by Jawas and an alien rhinoceros. That's true. And although, to be fair, that was a big beast of a thing. But you're right. The other thing that really stuck out for me in this episode was the whole thing of the Beskar armor that he's got, where all of a sudden now, in that fight with Cara Dune, it didn't really seem to be much of an advantage at all that he would have the Beskar armor on. So yeah, that was sort of odd. Andre Carter says the old trilogy, or the original trilogy, wasn't really kiddie, quote unquote. It had complex adult themes, which is why it had such a range in the age of people that enjoyed it. I agree. So that, by the way, this stupid, absurd thing that you keep seeing from people, it's just a children's movie about space wizards with laser swords. That doesn't mean anything, because good storytelling is supposed to be good storytelling regardless of the age of who it's aimed at. But by the way, Star Wars was not ever kiddie themed. If you think Star Wars, I've been contemplating doing a video on this to highlight all the ways in which Star Wars had a very dark edge to it. And it really did. Go back to the prequels. You've got Anakin's mum, Shmi, is kidnapped, and quite clearly she's been tied to a pole where every adult watching would go, okay, that's imagery of someone who's been raped. It absolutely, that's what that is, right? You've got all these sort of senatorial politics and slow, dry, political engagements. You've got people getting their heads chopped off. You've got, in the very first film, you've got an interesting little plot question I have too, is you have an arm getting sliced off in the first half an hour of the first film. You've got his parents being crispied alive, or his aunt and uncle, his adopted parents, Luke's adopted parents, get cooked alive, killed in a horrible cooking accident gone wrong by the stormtroopers. And then you've got that bloody arm scene in the cantina where the arm is chopped off. And by the way, the question I have is, that's the only time, isn't it, where we ever see a lightsaber chop someone's arm off and there's blood. The rest of the time, the wound is cauterized. So that's interesting. But anyway, and that's right from the very beginning. This was never just a kids film. These were never kids films. It was never just a kids series. It was never that. It was always, I always saw it as what would you call it? I think it's family friendly. It's what I would call family with a PG, or at times an M rating, actually, some of the prequels, but with a PG rating to it, because it was something that was trying to tell a story. And here's what I think it is. This is like Grimm's in space. And if you go back and read the original fairy tales, a lot of people are quite shocked. They see something like Cinderella, or I don't know, even Maleficent and things like that, and they all seem sort of so very childish. But you go back and read those original fairy tales, and they're quite strong morality tales. They're warnings really about morality, and they don't pull their punches, and they're really quite dark. And so in many ways, this is like Grimm's in space in a lot of ways. There's elements of it that the story is universal, and that's why it is so accessible for children, and there are aspects of it that really appeal to kids for sure. But then there's the darker aspects of it as well, and the more, the sort of the virtue tales, the morality tales that are part of that, people getting their hands chopped off constantly. Yeah, and it's funny, the same people who will say, oh, it's just a space movie for kids with wizards in it, and it's not meant to be taking like adult material, they're the same people who will then create commentary or write analyses claiming with their absurd Freudian lens on it, that people having their hands chopped off is actually phallic, and it's a symbol of the loss of manhood. Nah, it ain't. If you're reading too much Freud, too much of Freud's personal diary, then perhaps you'd think that way. But that's the absurdity of it. So the same people who make those kind of absurd suggestions will then turn around and say, oh no, this is just all for kids, anytime someone critiques the storytelling. And again, to go back to the main point, storytelling should be good. Storytelling should be good regardless of what age. I made up a series of bedtime stories for my kids a couple of years ago, and they often asked me to retell them, and I would just sort of make them up on the fly. But I would try and sit down before bedtime and think through a basic plot that I could tell them. And they had it was basically, the concept was, you had this witch called Ursula Smellybags, who was always trying to disrupt and destroy the kingdom. And so she's sort of the evil presence trying to undermine the goodness in the world. And then there's these characters, there's these young princesses, because my twin daughters always love that, these two princesses, and then there's an older one, and then there's the mum and the dad, and they're always she's always trying to trick them and destroy the world in some way, or do harm to them because she's jealous. And then they are always sort of overcoming this, the threat that she poses, if you like. And then there's another character, key character, and he's kind of like the guru, and he's a wizard. He's a good guy. He's with the family. He's called Wizzle the Wizard. And so these stories, though, what the kids loved about them was, even though it's very rudimentary, and we're just talking bedtime stories here, they get the characters are relatable and interesting, and then it's the adventures that they go on. And so the story's got to have a beginning. You got to explain what's going on, and then it's got to have an ending, and that's what they're looking for. And so that's the thing that's wrong with, like, for example, The Last Jedi. That storytelling is just not at all what it should be. And there's big issues there. And so that's where things break down. And so just turning around and saying, wow, it's just a space movie for your kids, that doesn't solve that problem. Apologies here, I've got lots of pop-ups appearing on my phone all of a sudden. Ryan says, sometimes I wonder what might have been if Lucasfilm was bought by HBO instead of Disney. We have been spoiled by shows like The Wire, Game of Thrones, Band of Brothers, Chernobyl, etc. Yeah, and I think, interestingly enough, what I wouldn't want to see is, I don't think I'd want to see it go down the that hard, dark, gritty, R-rated adult content. You can still tell. I think that would be the undoing of Star Wars. I think what you can actually do, I think, which is can be done, and we've seen it, plenty of other series have done it, is you can actually tell a really good, compelling story, and you don't need to be R-rated. But you're right, what HBO probably would have done is they would have bought. Here's the risk, though. Here's the risk, because what would have happened potentially with HBO is HBO goes, hey, let's get Damien Lindelof and Rian Johnson to work together on something. So they try and create something that's just sort of let's subvert their expectations. And like, look at what's going on with The Watchmen right now. I haven't seen the latest episode, but The Watchmen, it's a mess. They're making a mess of it. So yeah. Striking Talent says, that's the problem with modern media, whether movies or computer games. It's all about the looks, and there is no moral to the story anymore. And that's the thing. You're exactly right. That the whole Striking Talent, that is a really good problem here. The underlying goodness, truth, and beauty, the depth of the human experience is often missing, and it's just all about the flashy things. And so it's funnily, that's when. So I'm quite comfortable critiquing The Mandalorian, because there's things that should be critiqued about this episode. But it seems that a lot of the pushback that I get is from people who are one of two camps. They were like, well, look, this is nowhere near as bad as Sylvia, thank you for that super chat. Have a beer on me, mate. Well, I absolutely will. I won't have a beer. I'll have a whiskey. So thank you very much. This was one of the things. So there's two camps. There's one camp of people who are saying, well, this is nowhere near as bad as The Last Jedi, so you've got to praise it. And I'm like, no, that's not how that should work. And then there's another group of people who just love all the very superficial stuff. they are like, look, I love the I love the look of it, and the visuals are amazing, and that baby Yoda. And it's like, that's you've just got to praise it for all those things. I'm like, again, where is the storytelling heart? That's the key. If it's telling a story, where is the story? Where is the character development? Even Cara Dune, it's like, okay, so we've got some basic character development introduction. We need more though. Let's actually hear more of Cara Dune into the story. Then like I would have actually, what I would have preferred, funnily enough, was I would have preferred if they had actually taken this episode, and what they'd done was that actually used it as an opportunity to introduce Cara Dune. Sorry about that. We just lagged for a bit there for a second. But if they used it as a chance to introduce Cara Dune and to actually to have more of a focus on her rather than that village battle, I think that would have been a good thing. Sylvia says even better in response to the whiskey comment. I might break open a whiskey on our Christmas live stream on Christmas Eve. Ryan says, yeah, I've been wondering why so many celebrate Mandalorian as great TV. It seems to clearly not be yet. I'm in the minority to point out that it is mediocre so far. Yeah, to me, there's been flashes of greatness in the okay, so okay, are we back on air? Can people see and hear me now? Maybe I said the wrong thing. I know what's happened. I know exactly what's happened. My wife has just gone and logged onto her computer. So I'm going to send her a little message. Please stay off the computer. How hilarious is that? So can everyone see me? Yeah, okay, good. We're back in business. Apologies for that. Yeah, like I said back at the very beginning, the concept of sound. Sorry, I'm just telling my wife to start the internet. Please, dear. Put in a little love you at the end. Hopefully I won't get into too much trouble there. Okay. So, yeah. Hear me? Are we back on the air now or not? No, I think we're still off air. Oh, we're back in business, are we? We are back in business. Yeah, I'm very fuzzy. Issues here. It seems to be a huge. Maybe you're not allowed to say things about Star Wars. People hear me and see me or not? random. Things gone wrong with YouTube, folks, because the internet's solid at this end. All right, I think we're back in business. Put your hands up if you can hear me now. Right, there we go. I think we're back in business, are we? No. We're doing something funny again. Yeah, we are. We're back in business. So, yeah, I know exactly what I had to check something there, and I got booted from one Wi-Fi network to another. I don't know why that happened, but it did. So, yeah, apologies. I'm so sorry about that, folks. When it rains, it pours. So, anyway, Andre says, it was a great stream while it lasted. We need to get you on Nerdrotics Friday night tights or the High Council. Mate, I'm always happy to go on, and I don't know what I'd have to contribute, but whatever it is, hopefully it's something of entertaining value. Yeah, quality is back. Yeah, it's bizarre, eh? I got booted for some reason, and it kept trying to bring me back online, and it wouldn't. So there you go. So we're kind of back. Anyway, so what was I saying? I was saying, let me get some final thoughts, and then I'll wrap things up, and Pete, you guys can say whatever you want to as well. But the Mandalorian, like I said from the very beginning, so there were two camps. There were people who were like, this is better than The Last Jedi, so you're not allowed to criticize it. Or those who were saying, I love all the flashy stuff, but the storytelling heart was missing. And that's the problem for me. Right from the very beginning, you can go back and watch my original video on this. It's the story feels thin. And it's I don't think this is exclusively a Disney problem, by the way. People say, oh, it's Disney, it's Disney. It's not Disney. This is a problem with storytelling in the modern era. It's so much of it's made to corporate formula, and so much of it is influenced by the ideologies of the day, where we live in a culture now which doesn't really place a premium on the universal truths around goodness, truth, and beauty. And so what tends to happen is we just tend to get these really quick. The other thing is we consume a lot now. And so everything's just about quick, get lots of stuff out there. We just got to sell them another episode, sell them another film, got to keep the money ticking over, and it just becomes this constant cycle of very shallow and, largely vacuous content that's being pumped at us in an effort for us to part company with our money. And so taking time and telling good stories, I still think people involved want to tell good stories, and there are still examples of it. We've just seen Scorsese's The Irishman. He has a good storyteller who tells good stories. But he ain't pumping out a movie every 5 minutes, is he? Christopher Nolan is another one. You look at Christopher Nolan on average, it is an average of about 2 years between each project that he does. And again, the focus is on good storytelling. And so I think that that those issues all sort of have culminated, and this TV series is sort of simply a reflection of that. It's just some of the I guess the depth that could have been there's just a little bit missing. So Master Cypherdius says, Master Cypherdius, we haven't seen you in eons. It's a little prequel joke there. The latest Mando episode with the Native American storyline was very weak. Yeah, I agree, it was. Like I said earlier, it felt like filler, it felt like a sort of Star Trek episode of the week sort of thing. All of a sudden, it deviated quite dramatically from the plan. Thank you, Mod M, for the donation there. The super chat. He says, I don't know whether it's male or female. Mod M says, have you read The Cursed Kings by Maurice Druin? No, I haven't. Would you recommend it? Has anybody else here read The Cursed Kings? I'd love to know more. Can you give me a bit of a synopsis? No, I haven't, because I haven't. At the moment, I am reading a book I'm reading a couple of books, actually. I'll show you what I'm one of them. I'm terrible at starting multiple books at once. So one of the books I'm reading at the moment is this one here called Empty Planet. The Shock of Global Population Decline by Daryl Bicker and John Ibbotson. It just goes through all the data and the research on population and fertility rates to show how we're actually heading towards major population decline around the globe, all around the globe, and that we're going to be in trouble. It'll certainly change the climate change debate because there won't be as many people emitting carbon. Will also have a profound implication on economics. So all of a sudden Disney will have to change its model because capitalism as a system, and I'm not anti-capitalist, just to clarify, I'm not a communist or anything, but capitalism as a system relies on a spending economy, and you need consumers. So you need a new influx of consumers constantly coming to keep the spending going. And as they point out, that's going to be an issue going forward. The other thing that's going to be an issue economically going forward is the fact that once you hit a tipping point in a society where you have more retired tax dependents than you have working taxpayers putting money into the economy tips. And sort of Japan's fast heading towards that right now. So that's one book. And the other one is called On Ordered Liberty by Samuel Gregg. It's a book I've read before, actually. I'm just rereading On Ordered Liberty, a treatise on free society, which is quite interesting. So tell me, Mod M, though, about Maurice Druin and the Cursed Kings. Have I read Discworld? I know I haven't. It's been one thing I've ever since reading Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and people have said you should read Discworld as well. Okay, so yeah. French king who had the Templars arrested for crimes they didn't commit. It was inspired by George R.R. Martin, Game of Thrones. Oh, it has inspired George R.R. Martin on Game of Thrones. So it's got a darker tone to it. Funny, I'd never even heard of it. So there you go. And I like to think I am reasonably well informed on classic literature. Well, there you go. What period is it from, Mod? Can you tell me how long ago these books were first published? So Striking Talon says, yeah, especially here in Australia, the only way our economy is growing is through immigration. That's right, and it's not sustainable. Immigration growth is not sustainable because even those areas where you're bringing immigrants in from, their fertility rates are decreasing as well. And so it's not like it's not as a people factory pumping out people that's just going to keep supplying people. The other thing they point out in the book is that the UN population data, which was always showing that we were heading towards a peak and then we were going to drop away, there's lots of experts now who are saying the population data has probably been overestimated for various reasons, and so they think the peak is going to be hit a lot quicker and it will decrease quicker as a result. Chris says, I highly recommend Discworld. Okay, have I read A Canticle for Leibowitz? Yes, I have, and I highly recommend A Canticle for Leibowitz. I have a copy sitting on my bedside shelf, my large bookshelf on my bedside in our bedroom. I love, and I recommend everyone should read A Canticle for Leibowitz, written by a returned serviceman who came back from World War II and has written one of the most profound and important pieces of, what would you call it? Maybe dystopian science fiction, possibly. It's not really dystopian, but yeah, it's an alternate history. So for those who don't know, it's a book that's split into 3 separate ages. It's not a massive book, but it's set. The first age starts after there's been a nuclear war. Global nuclear war has wiped out the planet, and there's these monks. Everyone's gone back to living a life pre-technology, and so there's these monks who go around roaming. These Catholic monks who go around roaming the place trying to find old documents, and they save them and they transcribe them by hand, and they create parchments, and they find this monk at the start of the book finds a circuit diagram. They don't know what circuit diagrams are though, but they know it's important knowledge, so they must protect the knowledge. And it tells the story. It's set in the same abbot over the 3 eras, and you get to a point where by the time the book is concluded, the Earth has recovered technology and it's more advanced than what it was than we are today. But the whole story, I won't ruin any more of it, but the whole story is that those same issues of morality and ethics are still flawed and broken in the human person. The tendency towards evil is still present regardless of how far we've advanced. I'd highly recommend it. But yeah, so that other book that Mod M was talking about, which was called, let me find it here, The Cursed Kings, published in the 1960s. Okay. Yeah, post-apocalyptic. So Matt says, Billy D. Williams just came out as gender fluid at 82 years old. I'm going to Google this because I suspect that this is a piece of satire. This better be satire. Where are we? Let's Google this. Billy D. Williams. This is some. Okay. It's true. Oh no, Billy D, what's going on, son? Oh no. Billy D. Williams Star Wars star Billy D. Williams embraces gender fluid pronouns. Star Wars legend Billy D. Williams uses male and female pronouns. Come on, please be trolling. Either that, you're right. Someone says he needs work. Anyway, what are you doing? Oh, Lando, the pansexual. Oh no, this is too much. What the heck? 82 years of age. I finally found myself. Oh no. Oh, that is just gold. That is just absolute gold. This is classic, man. Anyway, so let's read the article from the. I won't go to the Mary Sue. I'll spare you that one. I'll go to the New York Times, second best. Where are we? Okay, so I say himself and herself because I also see myself as feminine as well as masculine, the actor told Esquire magazine. Oh, okay. Gosh. The actor Billy D. Williams has been the very embodiment of cool charisma for decades. Well, I think that is an absolute overstatement. He has not been the embodiment of cool charisma for decades. That's for sure. He's been largely absent from the scene, you'd have to say, for quite some time. I mean, he was big on Star Wars, right? Where are we? The embodiment of cool charisma. And what does it say here? He's a cape-wearing smuggler, Lando Calrissian in Star Wars universe. And while Williams' brand of cool has been synonymous with masculinity, who can forget the slightly cringy machismo in those 1980s Colt 45 ads? Yeah, 1980s. You're having to go back to the 1980s to draw on that machismo. I never know how to pronounce that word. In reality, Williams straddles the gender binary, according to a recent profile in Esquire magazine. You see, I say himself and herself because I also see myself as feminine as well as masculine, Williams, 82, told Esquire. I'm a very soft person. I'm not afraid to show that side of myself. That is not what femininity is. Please, someone, please, get this great. I have a softer side to myself. So do I. And I'm a bloke. And I'm still masculine. That is not what makes you a female. Gosh. I mean, talk about, this is the absurdity. So in an article where they're claiming that he straddles, there's no gender binary sort of thing, right? It's just sort of straddling it. Then they have this very binary fixed view on what they think masculinity is. Men don't cry. I'm a very soft person. I'm not afraid to show it. Neither am I, mate, but it doesn't make me a woman. I think of myself as a relatively colourful character who doesn't take himself or herself too seriously. I think he might be trolling them. Maybe he's trolling them. Come on, please be trolling them. When Esquire points out that Donald Glover, who played a young Calrissian in The Solo, released in 2018, The Solo, talked about the character's sexual and gender fluidity, Williams lights up and responds, "Really? That kid is brilliant." That's gold. Really? Oh, it must be brilliant. I don't know what he said, but it must be brilliant. Last year, shortly after Jonathan Kasdan, a writer on Solo, confirmed that Calrissian was pansexual. Honestly, is this a desperate attempt to distract us from episode 9? Being attracted to people regardless of gender or sex. Glover said, how can you not be pansexual in space? That's not how that works. While Williams, who has been married to Toriko Nakagimi since the 1970s, did not outright claim to be gender fluid or otherwise, his/her embrace of gender fluid pronouns is part of a greater revelation in Hollywood and beyond. There is a greater revelation, my people. Gather round and I will read to you from the book of Gender Fluidity, chapter 3, verse number 9. It was the year 2019. Thus saith the Lord, when the great prophet Lando came forth from the desert and declared, I am neither male nor female. They shall make an image of themselves that is neither male nor female, and they shall bow down before that image. Oh my gosh. Where are we? Though among celebrities who have recently opened up about their pronouns and gender, Williams is among the oldest. You can say that again. Wow, at 82 years of age. Far out. Which makes me wonder whether he's trolling. In September, the Grammy-winning singer Sam Smith, 27, who identifies as queer, gender, and non-binary, publicly announced their pronouns. There's no there about it. Stop doing this to the English language. His, her, whatever, but they're not a there. Hi, I'm a group of people. Hey, dear, what are they having for dinner tonight? Today is a good day, so here goes, Smith wrote in an Instagram post. Scholarly treatise coming after that. I've decided I'm changing my pronouns to they, them, after a lifetime of being at war with my gender. I've decided to embrace myself for who I am inside and out. This is the absurdity of this. So here's a man with serious internal confusion, which needs care and healing and everything else. And then he says, by embracing a confused description of myself, they and them, I will find that healing. That's not how that's going to work. That's not how that's going to work. The non-binary actor Asia Kate Dillon, 35, a star on Showtime's Billions, talked to the New York Times earlier this year about their pronouns. She's not a there. There's no there about it. Oh my gosh, man. This is madness. I'm multiplying. They are everywhere. About their pronouns, which are they, them. I can release she, her pronouns. I can use they, them, Dylan said. This is who I am. Nah, you're confused, Pappy. That's what's going on there. And when you need good community around you, a good bit of stability, and a good old-fashioned dose of goodness, truth, and beauty, and you'd be like, you know what? Life is good. I don't need to muck around in the shallow end of the pool with this vacuous nonsense. In an interview with Out magazine in June, the Queer Eye star Jonathan Van Ness said that he identifies as non-binary while retaining he, him pronouns. Oh no. I'm gender non-conforming, he said. Like, some days I feel like a man, but then other days I feel like a woman. How would you know what it feels like to be a woman? You can't just put on a Shania Twain and sing, I feel like a woman, and then say, oh, I know what it feels like to be a woman. That is absurd. That is not how that works in the real world. But hey, there you go. The wokeness meter has gone up. This is a really odd thing to do. I doubt it. I doubt it's Disney's marketing ploy. What is this, man? What is this? So, sorry, Kate Robinson, were you asking about who is this? I assume you're not asking who I am. They are. Who I am. This is Billy D. Williams. Billy D. Williams has come out and he said that I say himself and herself because I also see myself as feminine as well as masculine. But all he said was basically, I've got a softer side to me. and I'm a colourful character, which again doesn't mean that you're not a male. That's odd. Anyway, Andre says you underestimate the power of Shania. I used to love that song. Years ago. How's this for a confession? Years ago, I had my own DJing business, and I do regular DJing work, and it was good. Paid the bills on the weekends and stuff. It was like I worked a 9 to 5, and I did that on the weekends. And that song, man, that was peak. That was a song for the ages. Everyone wanted that song. If we did a pub gig, you did a hen's night, you did a wedding, everyone wanted Shania Twain. It was a safe bet. Yeah. And in the 90s and early 2000s, we were trying to break down labels, and now everything needs a label. Yeah, it's so bizarre. I mean, to me, there's a great sadness to it, because it's the confusion and the loss of authentic understanding of the human person. And again, this is what we see reflected now in a lot of the storytelling. So you get this kind of propaganda angle that starts to take over, where people want to actually preach a message at you and say, hey, this is what you should believe, or, here's a message, or here's an ideology for you. And that takes the place of good storytelling. Yeah, man. Oh no. Another Gen 42. I've been told that I have more balls than some men. That doesn't make me a man. Well, that's it, right? I got 4 daughters and 1 son. And one of my daughters in particular, is a real tomboy. She's a tomboy. Still a girl. She's a tomboy, man. And she's just into... And my youngest daughter is she's real feisty. And she just walks up to me. I rumble with my kids a lot, so, play fights. But she's been the only daughter who walk up to me, just boom, close-fisted smack, to try and start a fight. Still a girl. When she's not doing that, she's playing with one of her mini unicorn toys, unicorn sprinkles and unicorn sparkles and all the names she's got for them. And when she's not doing that, she loves her Barbies. That's the reality of the human experience, eh? So yeah, how bizarre. So yeah. Oh no. Colin Walker says maybe they were going to cut all of his scenes from The Rise of Skywalker, so he's pandering to Disney to make the movie. Oh, that was bizarre. Modium says too many death sticks kills the brain, folks. Oh no, I don't know. Billy D, what have you done, my son? What have you done? Look, I've seen him in other interviews, and I do wonder whether he's taking the mickey a little bit here. I mean, maybe he's being serious, who knows? But there you go, Lando. Oh no. I mean, the reality of this thing now, though, is that even for those people, and there are people out there, it's a minority of people, but there are people who do experience gender dysphoria, where they have a gender identity disorder. They are confused about their gender identity. It's a bodily dysphoria. They don't feel that their body is right. Just like people with anorexia who don't feel that their body is the right body. And so they try and do all sorts of things to try and adjust, because sadly they experience such confusion about their identity. And so for people in that camp who actually need genuine care and a loving community to wrap around them and actually to help them find a sort of a charter course through that, this kind of rubbish isn't helping anyone. I mean, the whole thing's just an absurdity now, and how does that help anyone? It just leaves those people, I would argue, even more vulnerable to embracing a really bad pathway. That I was reading an article yesterday about a young woman who had followed down that pathway, had her breasts removed, and now just has huge sorrow and regret about what she's done. The whole thing's a tragedy. But that's what this rubbish is feeding. Man. John Lyon says, my 10-year-old daughter loves to attack me the moment I get home from work. I've trained her well. My 12-year-old's a bit of a reader, so she's sort of hitting that teenage phase where all of a sudden she's getting quite cool. But anyway, yeah, so there you go. Well, unless anybody else has anything meaningful to add, thank you, Billy D. Williams, for that, for finishing out our stream that way. I think I might wrap things up there. Thanks for tuning in. You guys are awesome. The Irishman, if you haven't seen it, well worth a watch. Someone's asked me, do you think Lando will survive as a character in The Rise of Skywalker? Ooh, that's a good question. From what I understand, they're trying to kill off, aren't they? Everyone, isn't C-3PO going to be going? R2-D2, according to the rumors. I mean, who knows? They might all of a sudden have an epiphany and realize that they can't make anything without clinging to those old characters. So I would be kind of surprised if they destroyed them all. I was kind of surprised by that suggestion, but who knows with Disney. And so Lando, I suspect Lando is the one who's most likely to actually die in this movie, because he's an aging actor. They know they can't keep using him perpetually in roles, and also he's not a major player he's not like a Han or a Luke or any of those other characters that you think they might want to keep drawing on. So I suspect that if anyone's, whereas the droids, they could keep using the droids. Andre says, no, they might not kill him, but he'll be disgraced in some way beforehand if the strategy keeps up. Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it, right? Maybe this is what they're prepping us for. Man, he's going to get on there and he's going to repent for all the toxic masculinity that he populated in the Star Wars universe previously. So Mod M says, don't forget to check out The Cursed Kings and thank me later. All right, Mod, I will. Pour a good whiskey and do that. Yeah, maybe he's going to apologise for blowing up the Death Star. He's going to get on there and confess about... I wouldn't be surprised. Here's a possible prediction. We need to do a Star Wars prediction episode. That might be... that might be we might do that on the week of the 16th. Because that's the week I'm going to see Star Wars. Those who missed the announcement at the beginning, I bought my tickets. I'm going to see it on the 19th, 10 a.m. in the morning, and then I'll make a video straight away afterwards and let you know my thoughts. But I wouldn't be surprised, and here's an early prediction, that maybe he's actually going to make some apology about his formerly violent ways or something, and he's going to tell us, he's going to be like this supposed voice of wisdom that's going to tell us how the old ways were bad. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. Okay, so... John Lyon says, to be fair to the Star Wars team, my expectations were subverted. I didn't expect it to be such a mess. John, I don't think anybody did. We kind of had high hopes. Look at us now. Here we are, commiserating, drowning our sorrows. Man. Whoever thought the prequels were still bad, but they certainly look a lot more like Star Wars than this is. Anyway, so thanks for tuning in. Don't check out The Irishman. We'll be back next week for a live stream. And a huge thank you to everyone who gave super chats and who's supporting the channel. If you want to leave a tip in the tip jar on PayPal, there's a link for that below. I really appreciate all the support. Thank you very, very much. Fist and Fury said he killed a lot of innocent roofers and other contractors for sure. He did. He killed a lot of tradespeople on that Death Star. The rewriting of the Star Wars narrative. It's just gold. Thanks for tuning in, team. I'll see you next time on Left Foot Media. You guys have been awesome. Apologies for all the messes in the sort of the final third of this live stream, but at least we got the first bit out. See you next time. Well, I'll see you next week. We'll have another live stream. See you then.